Hello, everyone. Welcome to another devlog. Hello, Simon.
Hey,
We haven't at all talked before we started the stream, right?
no.
No,
I just
definitely not.
rushed to my chair and here we are.
Yep. All right. So, welcome everyone. I hope you all can hear us well. If not, please tell us, and we can see what we can do about the volume. But yeah, so Svelte 5. I hear rumors about the status getting closer and closer to 100%. Is that
Yeah,
does that
that's
mean we're getting Svelte 5 tomorrow?
no, not tomorrow, but I hope that the famous Rich Harris quote "weeks rather than months"
Yep.
holds true this time. Um, yeah. So, oh yeah, you just shared your screen, right? Yeah. So is Svelte 5 ready yet? No, the the test page. Yeah, this is basically for everyone new to this. This is the status page where we show how many tests of our runtimes of our test suite are passing, how many are still skipped, and you can see that are 26 skipped. You see nothing failing, which is yeah. I mean, we wouldn't skip a test if it failed. So, but yeah, we're very close in terms of that. And
That's a
what's
lot of
kind of
tests.
yeah, it's a lot of tests, but
Wow.
for some of these, it's because they run in three variants. So
Mm,
the runtime tests, they often have a server-side rendering variant, a purely client-side variant, and then a hydration variant, which means
right.
the same tests runs in all these three variants, and so
Mhm.
that uh, makes up a lot of tests. But yeah, it's even if we deduplicate that, it's still a lot of tests, and it has grown substantially in comparison to Svelte 4 as well. So I think we
Yeah, it
probably
looks.
added close to 1,000 new tests between Svelte 4 and 5.
Yeah. So is that just
Yeah,
for new functionality or making the everything more robust? Like, why do you need more tests? I guess maybe that's a deep question.
it's both. So for once, we need to write tests for for the whole runes mode,
Right.
um, because yeah, we were introducing runes, the new Svelte 5 API, and for that we obviously need to write tests to see that they behave as they should. So that makes up a lot of new tests, but we also added tests to the runtime legacy test
Yep.
suite, where we noticed through um, opened issues that there are some holes in our test suite where we added new ones to see, okay, this behavior should also be tested and secured against regressions.
Yep. And Paolo is mentioning here in the comments as well, every bug fix is also a new test generally to prevent regressions,
That's
which
true.
makes sense.
Yeah. So every time you open a bug, chances are high that a new test is added or an existing one is slightly enhanced. There
Yep.
are only very few occasions where there's no new test because either it's just refactoring and doesn't change anything, or it's something that's not really testable in a runtime test suite, such as some of the more involved transition tests. Those are only really visible visually and not
Right.
manually testable.
Yeah, it's
That's a
pretty
real
hard to
pain.
test.
Yeah.
So how's it going with the transition stuff? I have some vague memory of it being very gnarly and very hard to sort out in the new in Svelte 5.
Yeah, it should be a lot better now. So we had, I think, last week we had a start of last week we had a concerted effort to look at these bugs and to address them, and we basically closed all issues that are on the 5.0 milestone related to transition bugs.
That's awesome.
So for example, one of the more prominent ones, which had a lot of thumbs up, was that intro transitions, which were delayed, had the element already visible for the duration of the delay. Then it got got invisible and then appeared again.
Oh,
And that was
magic.
fixed. Yeah.
The wrong kind of magic.
Right, the wrong kind of magic. And then
Yeah.
there was also a very hard to debug, but ultimately we made it a bug around crossfade transition animation. So when you have two lists and you move one item
Right.
from one list to the other, this kind of crossfade transition, when you didn't wait until the transition was finished and clicked again while an element was in flight,
Right.
they basically were all over the place, and it looked really bad. And we fixed that as well.
Yeah, that's
So
good.
yeah,
It's
transitions
probably
should
not one of
be a
those.
lot better now.
That's great to hear. Like transitions are such a key like feature
Yeah.
of Svelte. It's like one of those standout things that
Yeah.
everyone wants to use them. But yeah, let's talk a bit about what's changed in Svelte 5. I guess not much has changed, but maybe there's been improvements or specific fixes that you want to highlight. Anything that comes to mind? Because we have this list here from
we have the list. I mean, we can.
We don't have to go through them all, but like just mention.
Yeah, but we can pick out some of them. So one of we have a few unplanned breaking changes. One of them is that the imports from Svelte/Reactivity, map set, URL, and so on, they have now the Svelte prefix, because we kept getting bug reports that people were moving their code from one file into the other, and then they were wondering why Reactivity wasn't working anymore, and were debugging for hours what's wrong, and then they finally realized, oh, I forgot the import, which wasn't visible at all because the built-in map and the map from Svelte/Reactivity had the same name, and so we decided to give them the Svelte prefix.
I think that makes sense. Like those kinds of issues are some of the more irritating things to figure out sometimes. I guess especially with reactivity, you have because it's named the same thing and it exists in JavaScript, right? So you would, but yeah. I mean,
it's also one of those things which you only really find out once you're exposing it to users for a while, and so we're very glad for all the brave people who are using Svelte 5 already and giving us this helpful feedback.
It kind of reminds me of like changing the prototype of something, like changing functions on like an array or stuff like that, and then just not telling anyone about it. But yeah, I think it's good that it's. But I mean, this was an explicit import, regardless, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So that's changed.
Another breaking change, obviously, which is more like a very, I'd say in practice, it's probably what the majority of people want anyway, and it's not really impactful. So it's breaking technically, but I don't think that it really breaks any apps. Is that transitions now play by default when you call mount.
Yep.
By default,
that wasn't the case
previously.
Before.
Yeah, it was false. It was false by default before, and we talked about it in maintainers chat, and some said, why didn't we make that change in Svelte 4 already? Because it felt like the more sensible default. So we took the opportunity to do that now. Yeah.
All right.
So that's basically it for the breaking changes. And then there's also a few improvements. For example, hydration has been sped up, so it's faster now. We added back the CSS injected compiler option, it was removed for some time because we didn't really see the use cases as much anymore. And then like with everything, we just had to wait for use cases to appear to say,
Yeah.
oh, okay, it makes sense to still have it. And one of those use cases is, for example, rendering emails with Svelte or rendering OG images using Svelte, because in both these cases, you need the CSS injected inside the JavaScript that is output, and you cannot reference an external style sheet. Or I guess you could, but that makes other workflows a lot harder, and especially in the case of
becomes very
email,
cumbersome.
they are very restrictive. So we
Yeah,
added it back, and it's
emails are
even
rough.
easier right now than before, because before you had in Svelte 4 you had this these three properties: HTML, head, and CSS. And
Yep.
the CSS property is gone in Svelte 5 still, even if we brought that back, because we're now including the style tags in the head property, which is
right.
like the I guess 99% use case that you want. So
Yeah.
it's even easier
I didn't
now.
know
You just append
you
head
moved
and
them.
HTML.
Well, that's actually very nice, because then you could just wow.
Yeah,
I had
right.
no idea.
And if you need it separately, then it should be easy to do a little regex to extract it out.
Right.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we also added a few more like Deathtime hints. For example, we are now warning when we detect a at HTML hydration mismatch, because we don't repair them, but we can at least warn you then in dev, hey, between the server and the client, there was a difference. If that is expected, then you should probably make sure that Svelte knows to update the HTML block.
Right. So are there situations where you would want them to differ? Like,
So there was the one use case in the related issue where someone basically pre-rendered everything to save money on the hosting provider, and most things were just static. But there was, I think, one part where the current time or something like that was displayed, and that was done through HTML.
Yeah.
And that one was always the current thing and updated, basically. So that was a dynamic part. And they were wondering why that doesn't update anymore. And so we added the warning to tell people, hey, this doesn't update. If you still want this, here are the ways to make it update.
All right, cool. Makes sense.
Yeah. So basically, we're optimizing here for the common case where you don't want it to update, and by not having code in there which tediously compares the server rendered HTML with what we would render on the client, we're also speeding up the hydration in the common case where things don't differ.
That's probably a good thing, because I remember there being issues about, like, if you have a really, really long blog post, right, and you use HTML, it can take some time to hydrate. So maybe that's
right.
I guess that's improved a lot. Then.
Yes, that is definitely improved, because it Svelte just sees, okay, there's a HTML tag and here's the starting boundary. I'm just gonna go until I hit the end boundary, and then I'm just gonna assume things are fine and not look into it. Whereas Svelte 4 basically walked the whole DOM tree anyway, just to make sure nothing has changed. So in that sense, Svelte 4 was a bit more robust to changes, but it didn't warn you about mismatches in dev time, so you could just happily code along, maybe create code that doesn't render properly on the server and then is repaired on the client, but that has a hit on performance, but you never notice because Svelte tries its best to repair it. And so now in in cases where it would be really expensive, we don't repair it anymore, as in the HTML block.
Right.
And we also warn you, hey, there was a mismatch. Maybe you should look into this.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
And then if you don't want to have certain warnings in the at compile time, we have a lot of warnings around accessibility, around did you really mean to do that? And people have asked for a long time that they want to be able to disable certain warnings at the compile option level, because they don't want to add these Svelte ignore comments everywhere. And
right.
so with the warning filter compiler option, you can now do that. And it takes a function which gets the warning object that Svelte produces. And then if you return true, then the warning will go through. If you return false, then it will be silenced. And that way, we also enable all tooling basically to be consistent with each other. Because previously, for example, vplugin Svelte had support for the top level on warn property within the compiler, within the Svelte config, and did things with it. But Svelte check had a different way how you need to set it. You had to pass them as arguments, like I want to silence these things. And the VS Code extension had yet another way to silence them. And the ESLint plugin had yet another way to silence it. So it was very disconnected. And so yeah, if you had all these tools in your toolchain, you had to duplicate a lot of stuff. And with this new compiler option, you set it once and
it works for all of them. That's great. So it's interesting because like in a sense, you don't want people to be able to turn off accessibility warnings. I know like sometimes there are workarounds to accessibility stuff, right? But you oftentimes want the warnings there, and you kind of want to force people into like doing the right thing. So is this a way of capitulating a bit to those people that just want to turn off everything and just do
it's certainly one of the use cases. It certainly is, yeah. So I wouldn't say capitulating, but it certainly was one of the bigger crowds that wanted this feature, that they just wanted to disable all accessibility warnings in the sense of, hey, I'm the sole user of this app. I don't have any impairments. So I just want to disable those. Yeah, they can do so now with the warning filter.
Scary.
This was also like one of the reasons why it took so long, because we just weren't very sure if we should do it because of these reasons. But ultimately, we decided to do it because over time, the distinct tools all added support for silencing the things one way or the other. And so we had this weird in between where you can do it, but it's very tedious. It felt better to just add this new compiler option, and then you can basically disable all warnings or all accessibility warnings. But you certainly shouldn't take this as an invitation to just do that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then lastly here, we have this create raw snippet thing.
Right. So this is basically the answer to a very long-standing issue that people had with slots, that there was no way to programmatically instantiate or provide slots to a component. So when you did with Svelte 4 or 3, when you manually instantiated a component like new component, open braces, target, props, whatever, you could pass these things, but you couldn't pass slots. So if that component expected a slot, you had no way to add that.
Right.
And
so
now,
this is important for like Storybook, for example, or
Right.
these kinds of.
This is a very low level API. I would say. So, for example, one use case is Astro, who are multi-framework, and so they need to provide certain integrations at certain points with the frameworks, and basically every framework has this notion of providing slots in some way or the other. And for
Yep.
Svelte 4, they had to hack around it by knowing how the internal structure of these slots looks like, and to replicate that basically to allow people to write slots in their Svelte component, and Astro putting the right content in the right place. And when we went through, like we did a grabs search on GitHub to see which people are using Svelte/internal stuff from Svelte/internal, and
Right.
one of the biggest use cases was replicating basically the way to make it possible to programmatically create slots by reaching into internals to reach into certain functions that the compiler under the runtime under the hood also uses. And so we knew that we eventually needed an answer to that, because now with snippets, which are passed through props, you would have the same problem again if we didn't have an answer to this. And so we wanted to avoid people reaching into internals again. And so that's why we have create raw snippet, which is very low level. So you shouldn't need to use it in your day-to-day code. It's more about integration at a low level. For example, Astro, as I just mentioned, or maybe Storybook, they can use it probably under the hood to integrate snippets at certain positions.
So this kind of starts looking a bit like functional components. Can we do create raw component too?
I mean,
I'm kidding.
that we have floated the idea of maybe having a rune where you can pass something in line, but there was no good API design that we really liked and which we felt was worth it to break up with the mantra of single file components. And like if you were to do that, that would mean that you could have components in a svelte.js file. So you don't really know anymore by just looking at the file name what to expect, so to speak. And as I said, the API is Svelte is turning into React, right? And yeah, we also don't like the aesthetics of it, so we just didn't do that for now. It may be possible, but it's definitely not a concern for us right now.
Yeah. I mean, if it it's interesting because if it becomes too easy, then people might start doing that instead, and then you end up having two ways of doing components, which I mean that's probably not ideal. Or you end up just having everyone do one thing, but you don't really want them to do that thing. You want them to use I don't know. It's a philosophical.
And I mean, again, this is a very low level API. This is like no runes. This specifically isn't a rune or something, so that integrations like Astro can use it in their runtime by just importing it and then providing something. So the example in here uses the $effect rune, but you don't need to. Like you can do anything you want in here to make sure that the text content is updated whenever name changes.
All right, cool. I think that's it for the list that we wanted to go through. Is there anything else that you want to mention in terms of Svelte 5?
Yeah, we also the one thing I'd like to mention outside of Svelte is that we released a new major version of Svelte Preprocess.
So let's see if I can find is there documentation here. Preprocess.
It's not really. There are this would be the perfect segue into the Omni side.
All right. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, before we do that, just to quickly wrap up the Svelte preprocess. Um, so what we did is basically was more of a maintenance release, I would say. The biggest achievement that we have is that we've gone from very many dependencies, transitive dependencies, to zero dependencies,
Oh,
because
nice.
we this was possible mainly because we removed a TypeScript preprocessor variant,
Hmm.
which ago, which is not that long ago, but in web development terms, it was ages ago, where um, back then TypeScript didn't have a good way of differentiating between type imports and value imports. And then they later added APIs over time, but they were very clumsy, and the VS Code also didn't have great support for automatically creating a type or value import, so you had to do that yourself. And so that's why we had implemented a preprocessor, which was basically telling TypeScript which of the imports to keep around and which ones to tree shake out, without
Right.
needing you to write type or not type. So, and that meant in a very hacky and elaborate tool chain where we had to compile the Svelte file multiple times in different variants
Mm.
and
Sounds like a
then
lot of work for the
concatenate the
computer.
source maps. Like it was very clever, but also very complicated, and meant that we had to pull in quite a few transitive dependencies. And
Yeah, getting
now
rid
that we have
of dependencies is also all the rage nowadays. So
right, yeah, right. Um, and the push to remove that was also um, one of the reasons why we did the major release, to get rid of all these transitive dependencies, because there was one dependency which then had a lot of dependencies on its own. Um, yeah, and now, like nowadays, TypeScript has great ways to differentiate between type and value imports. You just set the verbatim module syntax compiler option to true in the TS config, and then you can use it. And VS Code is clever enough to know, is this a type or value import, and automatically prefix the import with a type if needed. And so it's really not a concern anymore. And so we threw it out. I honestly don't know how many people still have used it, but those who do still, I think it's also a good nudge for them to transition towards the more
right.
um, up to date version of doing these things.
That makes sense. Yeah. So you mentioned the Omni site.
Yeah,
I think
the
Rich may have
perfect
talked a bit
segue,
about
because
it
you said
last time. Yeah.
you wanna find documentation on Svelte preprocess
Yes.
on
Yeah.
svelte.dev, but all you
And this
find
is not
is
the
this
Svelte
little, yeah, this is
preprocess,
not
right?
these are not the docs on Svelte preprocess, right?
This is the actual
And so,
preprocess function for the Svelte compiler.
right, but it would be great if you could just click on search and search for Svelte preprocess, and then you actually get
Yeah.
documentation on Svelte preprocess on svelte.dev, without having to go to GitHub, go into the markdown files, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And
Or
that's
change to kit.svelte for kit documentation or
right. And
whatever it might be.
then you have an API, and then you think, like, is that part of Svelte itself, or is that part of Svelte Kit? And then you search in both and find
Yep.
find the solution after having to do two searches if it goes wrong. And so the Omni side is basically the answer to that. It means we will. That's the idea of, at least we're in very early stages of doing this, and we don't know how it turns out yet. So this is all like non-committing what I'm saying now.
Yep.
But the idea is that we move all the documentation, not just on Svelte and Svelte Kit, but also on related tooling like ESLint, language tools, Svelte Check, VS Code extension, how to set up these things, Svelte
Everything you need.
Preprocess, basically everything related to Svelte that is first party, like maintained by the org.
Yep.
Move all these documentation things into svelte.dev and have them live there, so that you have one site you go to and find all the documentation related to Svelte there.
Yeah, it's one of those things I remember now thinking back. I've like every time I've wanted to find like what the options are for different like Vite plugins, Svelte, or all these official things that aren't on in the documentation site. Like it's always a pain because you have no idea like where, like you mentioned, where to find like this specific markdown file in the repo somewhere. So I think this is going to be great, and it's also going to reduce like the amount of questions in the Svelte Discord as well about these things, because people will actually be able to find answers by going to the documentation site. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah. In terms of how we structure it, the idea is that docs basically, so if you click just on docs, you would go to an overview site where you would see different sections like go to Svelte Kit, go to Svelte Check, docs, whatever.
Yeah.
And then when you click on those, you basically get the same documentation you have now on Svelte or Svelte Kit, basically the same sidebar where you can navigate around. And then if you want to go to something else, you can click on docs again, or maybe we also add a menu that
or something
drops out on hover, so you can save one click. So yeah, we still have to figure out the details. Also, how to create the new landing page, how to encapsulate both Svelte Kit and all the other things that are on there now.
How
to create a decent landing page there.
It is kind of confusing, like going between the kit and the Svelte site. They look very similar. In terms of
and I mean, people also always ask like, what is the difference between Svelte and Svelte Kit? Yeah. And I think some people say the lines are too blurry. Others say it's not co-located enough. And I feel like with the OmniSite, we can tackle both these concerns.
Yeah. Because you'll be able to see both at the same time, right? You'll realize like, oh, these are not different things.
These are not different. Yeah. Like they are different things. That is still true, but they are like tightly connected to each other. So that will satisfy the crowd who says these are too disconnected. But at the same time, we're gonna make it more clear that you can use Svelte without Svelte Kit. So we're gonna enhance the documentation around how to set up Svelte without Svelte Kit, with just using, I don't know, Vite, for example. So we're gonna enhance the docs around that to also address these concerns that people don't really know how to do things without Svelte Kit anymore.
Well, that sounds good. So looking forward to a new website then, basically. That handles everything. I have high hopes. The one site to rule them all. If there are any Lord of the Rings fans out there. Speaking of anything else you want to mention about the OmniSite, or can we move on to
yeah, just that related to the OmniSite, that is basically one of the biggest blockers between now and Svelte 5.0 to write the tutorial, the new tutorial, to update it, to write the new documentation, to make sure that the old documentation is still available. So we don't want to just do svelte.dev and then people who search for the Svelte 4 syntax, which will be the majority at the beginning, where we're just like, yeah, good luck. Nowhere to find anymore. That would be very bad. So
yeah, I mean, there
writing the
are
documentation
Svelte 5
itself
docs.
and organizing, structuring it correctly, that is basically one of the biggest remaining tasks. Because like bug-wise, it looks very good. We have only very few bugs that are left on the 5.0 milestone, and I have the feeling that the number of bug reports opened per week is also slowing down.
Yeah. Let's hope it's not a summer kind of thing. People
I'm
take some
confident
time
that
off from
it's
work.
just because we're very stable at this point.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so speaking of like websites, last devlog I mentioned the new Svelte Society website, and I've been building away on this for a while. It's got some functionality. You can search. Apparently, you can't search on my local branch. You can search. Did I just destroy the website now? But yeah, it's this version that's here. It's not completely up to date with what I have locally, so I need to push some of the changes, I guess. But yeah, this is basically what the site will look like going forward. I think last time I showed the Figma file. I don't think I've started working on it, but yeah, you can log in, you can like stuff, you can save stuff. I'm not sure if this is working on. Oh yeah, it is. But yeah, so it's coming along quite nicely. There's a profile page where you can see your posts if you've made any. That's not going to be a feature for everyone when we launch the site, but down the line, that's going to be a thing. Yeah, and I'm very excited to get this out there. I'm aiming for an end of August launch, where we're also going to have a bunch of recipes. If you go to the current Svelte Society website, there are a bunch of recipes here, but obviously these are very old. They're often about like Sapper, which is, you shouldn't be using Sapper. If you are, please update the Svelte Kit. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And then as well, I wanted to announce that Svelte Summit Fall 2024 has just been opened up. So you can sign up to the newsletter. You can submit a CFP if you want to do a talk. I encourage you to do that. If you missed the other ones, you can go back and have a look at those. And yeah, I think that's all of the stuff that I wanted to mention. Paolo is asking here, can you use Svelte 5 in Sapper?
That's good question.
Yeah. So
Yes.
James is also asking, is this live? What is live? Were you talking about the Svelte Society website or the Omni site? Because I don't think the Omni site is out there.
No, the Omni site is not live anywhere.
Yeah. But yeah, the
stage, so
yeah, the Svelte Society website is out there. I'll drop a link in the channel. I
are
wouldn't
further along the journey of creating the website than we are, and we
Oh,
will
really?
definitely link to the new site, because
Oh,
that's also one of the things that we want to increase awareness of the whole Svelte Society.
Right.
And what better way to do that than to have a nice prominent link to it?
That'd be
from
very
our
nice.
site.
Because I think even the current Svelte Society website is pretty good for finding packages and stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's still up to date. Packages, libraries, templates, resources. Maybe not the resources, but yeah, there's stuff here. All right. I think that's it. Anything before we? Any questions from anyone before we end the stream, or anything else that you want to end with? I don't know. People seem pretty content. No questions. Someone is asking for a switch statement, like the if but switch. makes sense. I think that's been talked about for years. I wouldn't count
Yeah,
on that happening.
yeah, it's one of those things where it it's nice, but it also introduces another way to do things. And with with templates, it looks a bit weirder compared to when you do it in JavaScript itself. So we never really have figured out the best way to do the API, and at the same time, it's also not a top priority. So
Yeah, I'd
it
much
comes up
rather you
from time to
worked on
time, but it
Svelte 5.
never really got prioritized.
Yeah. Okay, someone is saying that the background here is looking like a torture chamber. I guess it is. There used to be like a built-in wardrobe there that we demolished, and now there's it needs to be painted and stuff. So actually going to do that this weekend. So next devlog, we won't see the torture chamber. So another question here: Will Svelte Kit ever be batteries included? So I guess that would be something like Laravel style framework.
The end goal is certainly that it's more batteries included. Um, the the hard part is figuring out the right balance between opinionated defaults and easy setup, but having the flexibility to switch out parts later on.
Yeah.
And that is just very hard to get right. It's time consuming to get the integrations right, and so it's definitely top of mind, but we just didn't get around to it. Um, it will just take time. What I can say though is that there has been a lot of progress on Svelte headers. So there is this project Svelte-add, which started as a community project where basically the idea is you run a CLI command and then you get a, I don't know, you run Svelte add Tailwind CSS and it modifies your projects in the way that you can just go straight away and use Tailwind CSS because all the busy work is done for you, creating, updating the package JSON, creating the right configuration file, and so on.
Yeah, I
This
use
would
this all the
basically be
time.
done for you.
Every new
And
project I use, I use this.
yeah, and Svelte has now been incorporated into the org, so it has been made a first-class
Oh, nice.
citizen because we yeah realized that we need to make this more turnkey and to support these use cases better. And so right now it has been rewritten from the ground up by two great maintainers, and they are also exploring adding more integrations, which make SvelteKit basically a bit more batteries included because you can run these CLI add to commands. And then, for example, I think one of the recent additions is having a drizzle integration where you basically run the command and then it asks you which database integration do you want to set up, and then scaffolds the whole thing for you, and then you can basically get going and use Drizzle in your SvelteKit project.
This is really nice.
Yeah.
Oh, and you could just get the command and you can copy it. That's very nice.
Yeah.
I guess this has to be a bug though. Undefined.
Yeah, I think this is a bug. Yeah, as I said, this is under heavy development right now.
Yeah.
It's all being rewritten.
Yeah. Manuel is saying he's
Oh,
preparing
right.
an
Manuel is one of
I18 and
the maintainers of Svelte, by the way. So kudos.
yeah. Shout out. All right.
So this is gonna make get us one step closer to that. Obviously, it's only one step because it isn't quite the same as Laravel, because in Laravel you just not just get the integration, but like it's connected in a way that it then gets really easy to just create a new
Yeah.
schema and then add something to the database, all very tightly connected to each other. And so we have to explore what that means within Svelte Kit. Yeah, it's turnkey, it's easy to use, but at the same time flexible enough to be switched out later.
Yeah. So some questions here. What are the priorities after Svelte 5? Um, is it 5.x or is it Svelte Kit stuff? What do you think?
Um,
Does anyone even know?
so the first priority after 5.0 release will be all hands on deck fixing the most critical bugs that come up. I
Yeah,
hope there
because there
are
will
none,
be some,
but
probably.
they likely will be very few, and we have to fix them basically immediately. And then it's basically, I guess, seeing how the community receives the launch, how they use the new APIs, what pain points they have, where we have to tweak the tutorial or the documentation, and then also look into what are people still missing, which are the things, the new APIs we may need to add. We have ideas already, so maybe those two fit nicely together. But at the same time, we also want to then make sure that we can make use of Svelte 5 within SvelteKit. So I
Right.
guess the focus will then shift over to SvelteKit to add new capabilities to SvelteKit to make use of these things. For example, right now we have the page store, which is one store for everything: the URL, the current state, all the data. And when you update, like when we update the page store, everything, you get a notification that something has updated, even if the part you're interested in didn't really change. And so we can make
Right.
that more granular using runes. And so we're gonna do that. And then
Sounds like it would be quite an easy win as well. Like,
right, yeah,
doesn't sound like
I think this
too big
isn't
of a
too hard
project.
to do, yeah. And then from there we'll just see how we feel about the whole situation, which of the frameworks needs more immediate attention. If we have like great ideas for new Svelte 5 APIs, which we want to explore immediately, or if we want to focus more on Svelte Kit,
Yep.
that is not set in stone.
All right. And then last question here. Any plans for the dev tools? I imagine signals could help make that a lot easier. It's Antonio asking a question.
Um, Not related. Okay, you mean the in-browser dev tools?
I
Or
think
I mean,
that's
there are like dev tools can mean a lot, but
right. Right.
if it's
I
about
think in browser
the
dev
in-browser
tools.
dev tools, that's definitely something on our minds. And I agree that signals probably make introspection in some cases much easier, as you can see by the inspect rune, which tells you when something updated and who was responsible for updating it. Um, so we can definitely do something there. Yeah, DevTools is another topic in itself where we um, thankfully it's more up to date now and more recent, and maybe it even already supports Svelte 5. Um, but yeah, it's something we likely will also have a few weeks of focus on to see what else can we do there, what can we enhance it with. Should it stay as a browser and extension, or do we move it closer,
Right.
like make it a package so that you
Mm.
embed it into the site itself, which means that the extension can like access the runtime more directly instead of going through the
Through the
shielded
browser. Yeah.
extension.
So
Yeah,
kind of like expanding on the thing that Dominic created
for example, yeah.
like the thing where you can click on a component in the browser and then it opens up an editor, kind of something
Right.
along, maybe not exactly that, of course, but like stuff around that kind of thing. All right, I think that's it. Thanks, Simon, for joining me this evening.
Thank you for having me.
You probably had other more fun stuff to do than sit here and wax on about Svelte with me.
Oh no,
Maybe not.
it's fine. I mean, actually, this was basically one of the last work-related things I did this week, because tomorrow afternoon I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, really looking forward to that. And then when I come back, I hope that we are close to the finish line. And
just go away on vacation. Hope everything's done when you get back.
no, it's not going to be that way. I really hope they don't release while I'm away, because then
I'm sure they won't.
would be on my phone all day instead of enjoying the beach.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you to everyone who joined us and asked questions and commented. And we will see you all at the next devlog, probably next month. Bye.
Bye.
And then we stare awkwardly while